You're listening to another ambitious entrepreneurnetwork.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
You're listening to the award-winning podcast, The Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, featuring business leaders to help you navigate a constantly changing marketplace. Want to become known as a trusted authority while building a thriving business you love? The Ambitious Entrepreneur Show will show you how. Here's your host, Annemarie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Entrepreneur Show. And as always, this is brought to you by the influencealliance.com, which is the business building community for coaches and consultants who want to build a profitable and scalable business whilst make a much bigger difference in the world. And I'm your host, Annemarie Cross. Now, my guest today says, by knowing your potential client's current energy, you can talk their language and the sale will become so much easier. Joining me on today's show is George Araman. Now, George, he is a relationship entrepreneur, a success and relationship consultant and trainer, as well as a speaker. And he helps entrepreneurs and corporate leaders increase their productivity while also enhance team performance and satisfaction. Now, he also helps them find and keep love or create sparks. And George wrote his first international best-selling book, The Grey Dance of Love. And he created the first relationship and character personality types, the first relationship personality test, and the Grey Theory, which helps entrepreneurs become the best version of themselves. Now, on today's show, George is going to share a powerful formula that will help us to regain control over our business and our lives. He's going to share one of the most important principles of success for business and life, as well as how to increase your productivity, your sales, and team performance. So it's going to be a rich conversation today. Welcome to the show, George.
Thank you, Annemarie, and it's great being here.
And of course, you are calling in from which part of the world? We are an international network, if you will. So where are you calling in from today?
Indeed, from Lebanon, actually.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
So tell us, George, how did you get into the industry that you're now sharing your knowledge? Can you give us a bit of an overview of the snapshot of your career journey?
Of course. So it's actually a very unexpected journey. I basically did everything except that. I did my master's in marketing, I did management, entrepreneurship, and all those stuff. But along the way, I actually was friend-zoned by my ex-best friend. And so this actually led me to an unexpected journey, a beautiful journey. And once I started entering that, I went full into personal development. I read more than 1,200 articles, more than 200 books. Created an experiment, wrote a book, and all those beautiful things that came after that.
Yes. And of course, as we mentioned in the introduction, your international best-selling book, The Grey Dance of Love, the first relationship character and personality type, the relationship personality test, and the Grey Theory. Isn't it interesting how often circumstances or a situation will catapult us to an entirely new direction, and that becomes the area of expertise that we continue to share? What have you noticed since you now know what you know and start to teach? What are some of the impacts, some of the changes and ultimately results that you see happen in teams and in organizations once they start to become familiar with your teachings and then implementing some of the strategies, which I know, of course, you're going to talk about today. But let's talk about what are some of the results you've seen.
So in short, I would say an awakening. So once you start connecting with the material, and really what happens is you start to rediscover yourself, you reconnect with yourself on 4 levels: at a soul level, at an intellectual level, emotional level, and physical level. So physical, intellectual, emotional, and I keep on forgetting the 4th. Yeah.
It's interesting you should say that because, sometimes when we're working with individuals, we may approach it to one certain areas, that you might mention. Let's have a look at the physical. Yet we can do all of the work in that one particular area. And yet we know that saying, you are as strong as your weakest link. So if there is an area of growth or opportunity of learning in one of the other areas, if we don't deal with that, it's going to inhibit what we are doing and working on that one particular area. Say we mentioned physical. Have you noticed that is probably one of the areas you're so passionate about what you do, because you often don't hear of development being done across all of those different areas, only maybe one or two. So have you seen that it really does allow people to recognize, oh, that's why there's still always a block. There is still always something that was missing.
Yes, it's very true, because we tend to be very much focused, and focus is a really good thing, to focus on one area. But at the same time, I like the holistic approach, because in the end, it's we are spiritual beings. I take this from one of my mentors, Bob Proctor. He always says that we are spiritual beings living in a physical body with an intellect and emotions. So we have all four dimensions. So by working on all four dimensions, we actually leverage ourselves and really connect with each dimension to really be ourselves in a full and completely different aspect of how we're presenting ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. Would you say that, each of those dimensions, I think, is very important. However, has evidence come to light that if you are lacking in one of those areas, they will impact the rest, or are they all so intertwined? They're all very important. What's come from your research?
It's a little bit of both, I would say. So I'm going to give you an example when it comes, for example, to personal relationship. One of the reasons for example, people having multiple partners or cheating, or this is just, I'm not saying that this leads to cheating, but this is one of the reasons, is that they are not matching on all four levels. So this is one example of why it's important to be to have chemistry in all four levels. It's not just the physical chemistry. You need the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and the spiritual. And it's the same thing with businesses. And it's, for example, you can see from yourself when you're talking to a client, for example, if you only relate on an intellectual level. So, okay, let's say you both like reading books. That's great. It's a positive thing. You have one thing in common. But imagine if you have the four things in common, or two or three. The more things we have in common, the more chemistry we have, the more holistic our approach, the better things are, the more connected we become, whether with ourselves or with the universe or with our clients or with our colleagues or coworkers. And it's really, it takes a different dimension.
Yeah. If you're thinking about I would imagine even relationships within the business environment, your team, there are certain ways that we can adapt, to a certain situation. But then, of course, it's going to be important that we don't have to over-adapt. That is quite foreign, if you will, to our natural, what I would call your natural state. So, for instance, if you think about who I am, I'm an extroverted introvert, which means I'm quite happy to have a microphone and to speak and to share. But then I have to have those moments where I'm on my own. Silence is the best, sound for me. And so I need that to restore and recuperate. So if I was constantly on, if you will, and in a noisy environment, I would be worn out at the end of the day. So we can adapt, can't we, to different team members and so forth. But do you find, so what I think you're saying is, if you need to continue to over adapt or something's missing, that is when we go and seek other areas that kind of complement or that, that kind of strengthen us in those areas. So let's talk about this powerful formula then that will help us to regain control over our business and life. The awareness that you just said of those number of areas in and of itself, I think, is going to be incredibly helpful for people who are already starting to see, okay, there are some things that I can see are missing. But what's this formula that you talk about?
It's a beautiful formula that I learned from another of my mentors. His name is Jack Canfield. And the formula is as simple as the following: E plus R equals O.
Mm-hmm.
Event plus response equal outcome.
Yes.
Events plus response equal outcome. So what happens is that in general, we cannot really control the events that happen to us, but what we can do is we can control our response to the events, which will change their outcome. So we can either play the victim, poor me, my boss is not treating me well, or my client is not paying me this month, or whatever the scenario is.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can actually change our response and like take 100% responsibility, which is another, by the way, key principle, is to take 100% responsibility in our life.
Yes.
And so we say, okay, so let's say my boss is not being good with me, or there's a problem of communication. I can either blame and complain and do all those things that we always tend to do, most of us at least, and say, you know what? Okay, here's the situation. What can I do about it? Can I go and talk to my boss about it? Is he or she open for that? If they're very if they have more of a fixed mindset and they already have like this, for example, that they already had this opinion of us and they don't want to change, for example, then we can find another way of another alternative. We can always find ways. So we can either speak through another colleague or a boss, or we can simply, if things are really not working, okay, what can I do? I love my job, but I'm not satisfied with my boss. So I can actually apply for another job. I can create my own business. There are always solutions for those that are actually really seeking to do that.
That formula is powerful, especially when you see with what's going on in the world. And I think when we are heightened, because there may seem to be situations which are out of our control, what we often do, or we get a result that we didn't like, the first instinct is often to look for blame. Who can I blame? But that will never solve anything. And I'm sure we've all heard that saying, you cannot control what someone thinks about you, says about you, but you can control how it impacts you. And that in itself is empowering, because from there it allows you to maintain control, if you will, because if we go down that that hole of self, kind of self this and blame and all of that, and it does no one any good. What would you say for someone who is maybe only hearing this or recognizing how important this is for the first time? Where is a good place to start, to stop? Because it's very easy for all of a sudden an event to happen and you to respond, in a particular way. But it takes some process first to be able to get to a place where you can take a different response or a different reaction.
Just before answering that, I would like to give an example, because in general, there's a lot of people that tend to be like, but I cannot take 100% responsibility if I have, for example, a disease like cancer or stuff like this. It's not my fault. It's genetic. It's the environment. It's whatever kind of reason. So I think this is something very powerful to actually talk about. See, there's something that we tend to always blame it out of our control. But what we can do is ask ourselves a few of those questions, like, have we actually done the research? Yes, we're not doctors, maybe, but have we actually read all the articles we can on cancer or preventing cancer or healing cancer? Have we actually read books about it? Have we went to see multiple doctors? Have we talked about it to other people? At the same time, from what we've learned today on all the research, cancer is actually, some people might find this controversial, but it's in a way man-made, because it starts with the thoughts, and thoughts leads to feelings, feelings leads to behavior, behavior leads to action. And so if you follow, for example, Bob Proctor's model, it's like it starts with, let's say, negative thought leads to negative emotion leads to negative behavior leads to negative action. And at the same time, it leads to disease and then disintegration, etc.
Yep, a
And
lot of diseases is, and even scientific and medical research is showing high levels of stress or whatever that is placing our body under that is a whole other topic on its own, I'm sure. But okay,
yeah,
so we realize that there are things that perhaps we may have not even realized. Hey, we need to consider that because we can reclaim control over that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So can you please repeat your question so that
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we realize that there are some things that we can start to do, and I think you answered the question beautifully in the question, which was originally, what can we do if we previously hadn't even realized that, look, there are other ways that we can respond. And it's just to be curious, isn't it? To be curious and say, have I done that research? To stop, have I done that research? What else is available? What source am I going to? That's what my thing. What's the motive behind what that source is telling you? That is my greatest, because if that's the motive is not truth, or there's a an underlying motive for that particular body of people, then you need to research that to find that out for yourself. Absolutely, because often we don't even realize that what a reaction that can be instantaneous, we can actually slow that down and start to change our thoughts, our beliefs, as you say, which will then impact the response that we have. So are we responding or reacting, and in some instances overreacting? So I think that's powerful. So I love that formula. You've already shared one of the principles with us, which I think is incredible, but you say that there is another one of the most important principles for success for business and life. What's that one?
I actually already mentioned it.
Say it again, George. Say it again.
Taking 100% responsibility of our lives. This is super important because we really tend to, we've talked about it. So we blame a lot, we complain a lot, we believe that nothing is in our control. But if you really look at it, if we really look at the examples of people that really succeeded at whatever you call them, the 5%, the top 3%, whoever you rank them, they've all shared a similar journey, and they all speak the same language, and they all say the same things. Take 100% responsibility for your life. Because when you really look at those stories, Bob Proctor, for example, he started out of nothing. He was gaining $4,000 per year. He owed $6,000, so he was already in debt. He started by cleaning floors, and he's now like a multimillionaire, speaking all around the world, etc. Same thing with a lot of people. A lot of people started broke and then became multimillionaires or billionaires. It all starts basically. So one of the things I actually really, really love, it's one of my personal formulas, is that we need 3 things for success. And so the first is when we're dealing, with clients and stuff, the first is you need to have a desire or a passion for something. It needs to have a market for it at the same time. And at the same time, it's something that, so it's a passion of yours, it's a desire for the market, and there's a need for it. And once you do that, and if you look at it, all the people that succeeded had this in common. So they had this slack in some place, some area, whether it's finance, or in my case, for example, I had an emotional trigger. So it was basically start with my ex-best friend, and this was my, like, the lack of sparks in my case was like a driver for me to actually go there and really change my life. And so I could have said, you know what, okay, boo-hoo, she doesn't want to be with me, and okay, I'll go with the next, and then the next, and the next, etc., etc. Or I would say, like, you know what, in the personal development world, they've told us, if it's time to take responsibility, you really want to create something, you want to really change your life, take control of it. And this is what I did by doing all the research, by changing my habits, my beliefs, my patterns, my emotional way of being. And it's actually a ripple effect if you really think about it. From my personal experience and the people I know, when you start changing, it changes everything around you and in every area. Like, remember, I did start for...
Yeah.
Sorry?
it filters through to other areas
Yeah.
of your life, doesn't it? And I would imagine too, you may have started, and we talked about those 4 dimensions at the beginning of the interview, which you said was physical, emotional, spiritual, and what was the other one? Now I've forgotten.
Intellectual.
Yes, intellectual. And so you may have started to make some changes, done some research in a certain area, but by doing that and changing some of the beliefs and patterns that you've had around that, it's impacted some of the other dimensions, which I think is important. Now, that whole process, because often as entrepreneurs, and I know this is for me, you want change to happen immediately, but this kind of, for any change to be lasting so that you can respond appropriately and consistently take 100%, you were telling us that that's important. It can take time, can't it?
Well, I don't believe in time, to be honest.
Yep.
I believe that time only exists on the physical plane, and that's another secret. It's a beautiful thing. Time only exists on the physical plane. So I personally believe in emotional progression, not time. It's not the lapse of time. It's about you being ready. Mm-hmm. And for you to be ready, it can take a minute. It can take 10 years. It can take 20 years. Now, of course, there are studies like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours, etc. But it's very, very important not to go for the quick fix. I personally don't believe in get love quick, get rich quick, get health quick.
Absolutely. I was thinking more of the physical stuff. I would love to go to the gym once and then walk out going, don't need to go back anymore. But that's what I mean at time. Some of those things are instantaneously beliefs, those kind of things can certainly and by the way, Rachel Ma, thanks, Rachel. Great points. Change mindset and beliefs equals change lives. Absolutely. Tell a little bit about that whole time aspect, because there's aspects that we may think is going to take longer, where in actual fact it's not. And others, we need to be mindful that it is going to take consistent action to see the results that we are wanting to achieve. Speak a bit more about this, because I think this can be empowering for many who want that quick fix.
Exactly. So I was a culprit, by the way. I was one of those people that used to believe that, okay, you just have to change your beliefs and it just happens. And I realized actually that after a couple of years of just reading and doing all the personal development work, like reading, visualizing, affirming, and all those stuff, but I wasn't really consistently applying. I wasn't getting those massive amount of results I wanted. I was getting sporadic results. I was getting a quick win here, another win there, but they weren't as consistent as when I actually started to really implement the whole system regularly. And one of the key principles when I first started that is that I started with one habit. And this is really, if there's one thing you should take from this whole talk we're having, and this is really one of my favorite, start with one habit to change, one small thing. Focus on it for around 1 month, and then start adding others. And I'm going to explain why. So there are multiple researchers around habits. You can go and read The Power of Habit from Charles Duhigg, which is one of the most phenomenal books on habits. And there are others like Robin Sharma's The 5 a.m. Club, etc. It's very, very important to actually start with one. And one of the thing that, from experience, I said, okay, you know what? I know everybody said you can start with, it's better to start with 1 or 2, but then I said, I can do it. It's okay. I understand what they're saying. I understand what they're saying.
Challenge the status quo, don't we? They said 1, but you know what? I'm going to double the odds. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're I understand that, but let me just add a little bit more. I mean, it's easy. It's so easy. I can do them. But then we see that we're actually procrastinating, and we're okay, we do them 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, or whatever amount of time. And then we're forget about them. And that's because our own paradigm kicks in and makes us forget, or life gets in the way, or whatever, so that we don't change. I won't get into that because at least right now, because it's a very big topic. But going back to the starting with one habit, and this might be of interest to you. The first habit I started with, I said I wanted to have my 6 packs, and what I started with was 7 minutes. So if you've heard of the 7-minute the 7 scientific minute exercises, it's a proven 7-minute scientific exercises for all the entrepreneurs and CEOs and corporate leaders that actually don't have time. So we always have an issue. I don't have time. We all have 7 minutes per day. So I started with that, and when I started, I'm like, okay, 1 day, 2 days, a couple of days, and I'm like, you know what? I'm actually starting to enjoy it. So I added like maybe 10 minutes, and then on and on. But of course, at some point, I was like, you know what? I don't want to. It's not okay. I've done enough. Let me rest. But then this is where it's important to actually have this perseverance, this grit. Like, you know what? I know it's tiring, but the difference between people that succeed and others is that we do the things that other people don't want to do. And then it's okay, just a little bit more and a little bit more. And then 7 minutes turn to 10 minutes, 10 minutes to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25. And now I'm doing 30 minutes every day. It's been 180 plus days in a row. And after doing that, you start adding things. So there's a magic formula when it comes to habits. It's from Robin Sharma. It's 22, 22, 22. Mm-hmm. You need 22 days to destruct the old habit, 22 days to construct the new habit, and 22 days to integrate it and become part of your life. So 66 days. Yeah. I would always say go for 90, just because it's like 66. Maybe it's plus or minus. So go for 90, you will be sure. And once you do that, your whole life will change, because once you have those habits that are actually linked together, everything changes and everything transforms, and you start enjoying them. You stop, like at some point, once you pass the terror barrier or the barrier of your old paradigm, trying to tell you like, okay, but I prefer to sleep rather than waking up early, or I don't want to I'd rather eat this muffin or this big cheesecake than just or whatever the situation is. You're like, I lost my train of thought.
I know exactly what you're talking about, George. By the way, I've just brought up Derek Boykin's comment here, which that's a powerful way to bring an intention to the physical reality. Absolutely. And, you know, it's interesting that you should say that, George. And thank you, Derek, for sharing that comment, valuable to the conversation. I remember a neuroscientist, and her name has slipped my mind, so I do apologize. But she was saying through studies that showed, you know, that consistency, and it was definitely over the 60 days, but I like the 90 days as well. It really becomes a solid, you know, quarter of a year that you've put into ongoing development and action, if you will. And so that really solidifies that learning. So it becomes part of and parcel of what you're doing. And of course, you would have seen the 1-pack and then 2-pack and then 3-pack, and then all of a sudden the 6-pack is slowly starting. But what I love about that too is you could think about if you're building business foundations and then building your business, or whether it be that your team's performance or your own productivity, these things just don't happen overnight. There's different layers of, and what also happens too, and here's one of the greatest, I think, things that happen, and you know, if you've got some more validation to this, is that often as we are starting to change physically, we have to make sure that our mindset is consistently changing too, because if we still think of ourselves as that person who we were before the 6-pack, we're not going to maintain that, are we? So that longevity will ensure that all of the areas, you know, the intellect and so forth, is all growing and developing and at that level. So,
and here's another secret to that. It's also about doing it like not just, for example, there's the morning habits. Most people are aware of it right now, but I would also say it's important to have intermittent habits during the day. So what I do is I wake up at 4:44. I like the number 4:44.
Yeah.
And
that's all right. I'm with you. I love numbers as well, and they stand out for me too. Yeah. So 4:44, you get up at that time.
Yes, and then I have like 4 hours of habits. I really love it. I work on 4 levels: intellectual, emotional, physical, and spiritual. So I have a lot of work in the morning. And then what's really key is having, so I chose 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. So what I do is at 11 a.m. and at 3 p.m. for half an hour, I have short sequences of habits, or for me to reconnect with myself, no matter what happens throughout the day. Now, of course, if I'm in a workshop, during a full day workshop or something, I might alter it. I might not do it exactly as I want to, but there are always ways around that. And as long as we do it 80% of the time, I love the 80-20 rule. This is what matters. The reason why this is important is like, there's a cartoon image that I really love with a Buddhist monk who actually, there's the story that he actually meditates 1 hour in the morning, and then he goes out throughout the day, and I'm sorry for doing it, but it's just for the purpose of explaining it. He starts doing this time. So he's like consulting and all those things. And this shows that it really doesn't work. It's not about like being Zen in the morning, if you're great for 1 hour, but then for the rest of the 23 hours of your day, you're just crapping all around. You're not going to change your life. It's all about being there all throughout the day. So meditations work, visualization work, but it's all about being consistent. And by doing them, again, not all of them, and not, so it's certain exercises that you do. For example, let's say you start with your morning habit, 30 minutes of exercise, since we're talking about exercise. What I would do at 11, one of the things is I would do 10 push-up, 10 abs standing. There's a specific way. So I can be anywhere I am, and I do that. And 10 squats, for example. So this is one of the things I do. It's just 2 exercise, count till 10. It takes less than a minute, less than even 30 seconds for both exercise to keep me rolling at 11 and at 3. So this is something that, and the more you do it, you will realize that actually it's really powerful to get you throughout the day, because it re-energizes you. Mm-hmm. Especially, for example, for those that are introverts and that need time away from their colleagues, from their coworkers. You can just take half an hour. If your boss doesn't like that, then you're going to the bathroom, or whatever the situation is. You can always find a creative way to do that and have your own moment or your own time. It's super important, because this will give you more energy, re-energize you for the whole day, and you will come back with more product. This is one of the key hacks, by the way, for productivity. Yes. To actually reconnect with yourself. Mm-hmm. And this will actually boost your energy, boost your your energy, and give you more focus as well. So it's energy and focus for the rest of the day.
Yeah, brilliant. What I love about that is that, so often I notice this in myself too, because I work from home, always have, and I could just lock myself in the office. And I often would say, if it weren't for my husband coming home and saying to me, like, hey, have you finished? I think I would work 24 hours a day, because for me it's not work. And having those time slots where you go, I need to have a break, because even physically, if we're hunched over, or just those things, whatever habit we're trying to change, if we don't intentionally book those in the diary, and we always hear, if there's time that you need to take away to do brainstorming and just to sit and rest, I think we don't value the importance of being still, that stillness, and letting things settle. I mean, even neuroscience has proven that if we're overstimulating our minds and our, thoughts too much, it can be overstressful for us as well. And so be intentional with that. Whatever that is for you, for some people, it might actually be setting time to, I don't know, whatever it is, whatever that first habit is. And would you say start off with something that is not, because this is the Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, and we're all like that. We go for the biggest and, the boldest. Start off with some mini things that gets your momentum going, that you think, I nailed that. What's the next one? Because we've got to give ourselves some runs on the board, if you will. Does that also help?
Yes, creating momentum is really the key for everything. This is why, because the reason why we always start with a small habit or a small task or a small goal is because it gives us the satisfaction of achievement. So it releases dopamine. And at the same time, it's like it creates momentum. And so once we grasp the momentum and we run with it, this will help us actually create more energy and because this is the way life is. So life is all about flow. And so what happens is that we go with the flow. If you look at life as a river, we would be going with the flow downstream, and it would be easier than just recreating. This is why it's always hard to start. So the start is always the hardest. But once we get this momentum rolling, then this becomes easiest. And of course, it's also important that once we get the momentum to, like, as ambitious entrepreneurs, we always like to add the new thing, the next best thing, and always get rolling and on. So what we can do is we can always change it out. So what I do is I always modify slightly my routines. It doesn't have to be like big, but for example, I change a bit my affirmations, or I change a bit like one exercise. I tweak it here, tweak it there, and I always study myself in a way like, okay, how do I feel today? By changing this, is it helping me or not? Reflection is super duper important, and it helps us actually, okay, so I love this, I'm going to keep that. And it's something I think Fishin Nakhiani, the founder of Mind Valley, does as well. I'm not sure if it's him or someone else that does that, to always reevaluate your habits or rituals every now and then to make sure that you're actually progressing and moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. And Michelle J. Raymond, hey, how are you, Michelle? Loving these tips, which are simple yet powerful. Actually, sometimes the most simplest things are the most powerful and the most impactful. Thinking would help me get through working from home challenges. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes as individuals, or maybe this is just me, we often look at some of the simplest things as, yeah, whatever. I've heard that before. Yet if we're really honest with ourselves, when we look, are we really doing that? Are we really doing that? One of the most powerful things that works for me, George, that really gets me into action is sharing something publicly, because I am not going to go back and say to the people that I shared that with that, nah, didn't do it. In fact, I'll probably try and compete and get it done quicker and more effectively than I had said, because there's nothing more motivating than being able to go, yep, done that. And so, whatever works for you. And I love the way that you've said monitor yourself, because you're going to be able to recognize the good patterns, if you will, and the triggers that may set you off that will undo all of the work that you've done previously. Because that's a good point too, isn't it? Be mindful of what triggers you, and then either avoid that or put into place, if you are setting time and then all of a sudden your team books out that time in your diary, tell them, look, this date and time in my diary, this is unbookable. This is always blocked out in my diary. We need to step up, because if we don't take charge, that thing or whatever it is will continue to rule us, isn't it, or drive us. And we have to take 100%, as you said, responsibility for that. And Michelle shares, well said. We have had an amazing show. So we've had Rachel Ma, Derek Boykin, and Michelle J. Raymond joining the conversation too, George. They've loved what you've had to say, and I know will be impactful for them. If people are watching or listening, or even later the recording, George, how can they get in contact with you? Yes, you are based in Lebanon, but I would imagine that with the technology that we now have to use, you're able to work and support people from wherever they're based. Yes.
Exactly. So basically, I do have most of my clients are actually outside the country. So I do work a lot with Europe and the States. So yes, you can reach me either by going on my website, greydanceoflove.com, GREYDANCEOFLOVE.com, or you can send me an email at connection@greydanceoflove.com as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show. I know that it is very early for you. It was only 6 a.m, but no doubt you have been up since 4:44 this morning. So that's all right. You've already had a very productive day. So just another thing on your to-do list, which you can tick off as a done. And it's been great to connect. And please feel free to reach out to George. I'm sure he's got many more habits, many more formulas and principles that he can share with you as well. But start, what's that saying? The best time to have started was probably a year ago, but the second best time to start is right now. And I'm sure we have got a list or an idea of that one thing that we may have been putting off. And I challenge you in the most, empowering way, get stuck on that today. So again, thanks for coming on the show, George.
Thank you, Annemarie. It was a pleasure.
This podcast is brought to you by theinfluencealliance.com. Want to influence real change with your message by becoming known as a trusted authority in your industry while building a sustainable and scalable business you love? Find out how by accessing our free podcast series at www.theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series. That's theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series.